de los rasgos definitorios más sobresalientes de nuestra historia reciente ha sido el desarrollo tecnológico. Los logros en esta materia han transformado significativamente nuestras maneras de pensar y de interactuar. Gracias a él, la ciencia ha podido avanzar a pasos agigantados en los últimos años. En particular, ha sido notable el progreso de las neurociencias. Gracias a la tecnología, hoy en día es posible monitorear y observar actividades de nuestro sistema nervioso que antes nos eran inaccesibles. La comprensión de las funciones cognitivas de nuestro cerebro, por ejemplo, es muy superior a la que se había alcanzado en prácticamente 2000 años de historia, desde que los griegos comenzaban a investigar cómo funcionaba el pensamiento humano. Hoy nos acompaña Daniel Levitin, especialista en ciencias cognitivas y doctor en psicología por la Universidad de Oregón. Acompáñenos a conversar con él sobre algunos de los avances de la neurociencia y su aplicación para mejorar nuestra calidad de vida en esta era de las definiciones.
Hola amigos, ¿qué tal? Muy buenas noches, ¿cómo están ustedes? Gracias por su correspondencia, gracias por darnos sus ideas. Tenemos nuevamente un personaje aquí con nosotros en este programa, cuyo nombre es Daniel Levitin, y es el autor de 4 libros consecutivos. Uno de ellos, el más vendido de todos, que se llama This is Your Brain on Music, que es la maravillosa explicación de cómo funciona el cerebro y cómo la música tiene que ver tanto con el cerebro y tanto con un cerebro que funciona correctamente, que funciona con estabilidad y que funciona con armonía. Entonces, El Mundo en 6 canciones es otro de los libros. Este habla de cómo el cerebro musical creó la naturaleza humana. La mente organizada, pensar directamente en la era de la sobrecarga de información y finalmente una guía de campo para las mentiras. Pensamiento crítico en la era de la información. Este libro es apenas del 2016. Ha publicado artículos científicos sobre tono absoluto, la cognición musical y la neurociencia. Trabajó como consultor de música, productor y diseñador de sonido en álbumes de Blue Oyster, de Colt, de Chris, de Isaac, etc. Produjo también bandas de punk, incluyendo MDC y The Afflicted, y se desempeñó como consultor en álbumes de artistas. En fin, ¿para qué les platico? Es todo un verdadero estuche de monerías. Es genial que él esté con nosotros aquí en Centro Fox, en el evento de CITEC, y que esté aquí en San Cristóbal, en esta maravillosa hacienda que hoy es parte de la Fundación Centro Fox. Centro Fox es el propietario de esta hacienda y este hotel. Todo el ingreso que aquí se genera va directamente a los programas para pobres, para gente que necesita impulsar su liderazgo allá en Centro Fox. Así que Daniel, welcome to this program. You want to speak in Spanish, in English, French, or?
Gracias.
Good. Okay,
Je
Daniel.
peux essayer mon français.
Fine. Oui. Daniel, it's great to have you here in Centro Fox. It's great that you have come here twice. It's great that we're looking after how to work together with all your marvelous experience and all the things you can help us, because we have this foundation by the name of Crisma, where we have 246 persons being attended on problems that they have in their brain and problems that they have on their physical abilities. And we just began this week. We already started building the new facilities, where we are going to have capacity for 500 people of these characteristics to attend. This is in San Miguel de Allende. So thank you for all your support here. But let's start. Tell me a little bit about yourself, because on this program we try to convey the audience what leadership is all about, and when you discover your purpose in life, your leadership, and you start following a journey towards your objectives in life. That's very important for our audience. So let's start from the beginning.
Well, I'd like to begin by saying I'm grateful to you for inviting me back. I love it here. And I admire your work so much, as I told you last time, because if you look at the world stage, there are very few world leaders who continue to try and make the world a better place after they've stepped out of the public office. And you're an inspiration to so many people with the charisma, with the medical intervention, with trying to spread democracy throughout the world, your efforts there, and your efforts for transparency within the Mexican government. With the library, I'm a very big admirer of all that you're doing.
And you don't know the latest one.
Tell me.
I'm involved promoting legalization of cannabis,
Yes.
marijuana.
Yes.
I think that also helps with moderate use, with good medical prescription. It can do good for you.
You know, our mutual friend George Schultz and I were talking about this just a few weeks ago. He's on a campaign also to stop the war on drugs in the United States.
Okay, and this can help.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, now tell me about yourself.
Well, I'm 60 years old. I grew up in California. I was a product of public schools, and I took music and science in the school, and I loved them both. I went to after-school voluntary projects to do both, and I ended up going to college at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, when I was 17, and I wanted to study mathematics, and I also wanted to study music, and after a year there I realized I was still young, I was only 18, and I wanted to try being a professional musician to see how that worked. And so I dropped out of college. I am a college dropout.
I thought because it's difficult to pay for college in the States, especially MIT.
It's very difficult.
How do you do that in the States? What is it? Because I understand today there's a big problem for kids. If they go to these universities and they have to finance the time they're in university, it's difficult for them to pay back.
It is very difficult, and so I was lucky because I had a partial scholarship.
Okay.
And I also had to take out loans, and I paid the loans back. My parents weren't wealthy.
Yeah.
It's interesting because what I do today, my main job, is working for a new university called Minerva, that you and I have spoken about.
Yes,
We're in
yes.
San Francisco. And one of our important missions is to keep the cost of a very top university education low. Right now it's $12,000 a year.
Ooh,
And if you
not
can't,
even in Mexico.
right, and if you can't afford the $12,000, we pay. We provide full scholarship. And moreover, we don't want our students to end up with loans that they can't repay.
Yes.
So every student has to work. If they're on scholarship, they have to work for part of it. It came from my own experience of realizing I was lucky, but so many people were
Now
not.
you want to do
Yeah.
that good thing for others. Minerva, interesting name. What does it mean? Why did you select that one?
Minerva was the Roman goddess of wisdom.
Yes.
And so we are trying, our mandate, our credo, is to educate in critical wisdom for the sake of the world. We don't want our students just to learn things with no purpose. They have to learn things that will give them wisdom, that will confer wisdom, and then they have to use that wisdom to make the world a better place. In some way, it could be small, it could be making the community a better place, the state, the province, the country,
Great.
the world.
That's what we believe here in Centro Fox. But tell me, it's all comprehensive in the sense of different issues, themes, every career is covered, or
Yes,
or you're
basically.
humanities or everything.
Well, one of our insights was that the world is changing so quickly that if you go to Stanford or Berkeley, one of the great universities, and you study, for example, genetics or biology, even engineering, electrical engineering, the things that you learn today are no longer going to be helpful 10 years from now, maybe not even 5 years, because things are changing so quickly. And it's the same with humanities scholarship. And
then what's your answer for such intense changes, so frequent?
Our answer is two things, President Fox. First is to teach everybody to teach themselves, to become lifelong learners. The second is to teach them the kind of critical thinking skills that they need to know so that they can enter any field or encounter any fact or claim and evaluate it for themselves.
Okay. That's fantastic because it serves for all purposes.
It does, and I was lucky. We learned this at MIT, but there wasn't a class where we learned it. It was kind of incidental. It happened if you were paying attention. Now at Minerva, everybody takes a year-long course in critical thinking.
In tracking your path, you said you came to university, then you took what, mathematics and music?
Took mathematics, music, computer science, a broad...
When you started deciding where is going to be your life emphasis?
Well, I decided that when I was 6. My life emphasis was going to be science and music. And so when I dropped out of college to start making music, I joined a series of bands and I played music, but at the same time, I was interested in applying the science that I learned. So I started inventing sound equipment. I invented an early version of what's called an equalizer, a sound processing device. I started playing around with guitar amplifiers and rewiring the ones I had and coming up with new circuits. And I got a job in a recording studio so that I could learn about the technology.
For what I read in your book, you were late on music because you speak there about the kid on the, how do you say, the womb of the mother, and you put in music, and then you test a year after or two, and he was listening music.
You read very closely, yes. Most people miss that. This was a big finding that I learned about much later in my career. Of course, when I became a neuroscientist, yes. Would you excuse me for a moment? I have a little cold. Yeah, okay. A colleague of mine, Alexandra Lamont in England, played music for pregnant women.
Yes.
For the babies, actually, yes. For the fetus. And then when the baby was born, she took the music away, and she came back a year later. And she played the music they had heard in the womb, and music by the same artist from the same record that the infants had not heard. And the infants preferred the music they had heard before.
How did they show that they preferred when they were 1 year old? Because they smiled, or how do you catch that they were recognizing?
The way you do it is you give them the opportunity to control what they're listening to. If they look in the direction of the speaker, that means they like it and they want it to keep playing. If they look in the direction of the other speaker, it means they prefer that one, and so they had a choice.
Okay. So
the babies learn this very quickly.
You were going to go to a break, but we're going to come back for you to tell us that part of before you started getting really involved in neuroscience and all that work you did in the music space.
Yes.
Okay?
All right.
Cortamos y regresamos enseguida.
Recientemente se han realizado múltiples estudios sobre el papel de la música en el desarrollo cognitivo de los niños. Los resultados han sido sorprendentes. La música es la actividad que compromete al mismo tiempo el mayor número de zonas cerebrales. al hacer música, un niño lee la partitura, atiende al director, se coordina con sus compañeros, está en movimiento, recuerda los ensayos y se emociona. Al hacer música, el cerebro se ejercita enormemente. Por ello, la musicoterapia se ha vuelto una herramienta fundamental en el desarrollo de las habilidades cognitivas de los niños.
We're back. We're back with you. And let's start there. I understand that the brain has a lot of different parts. And some are very specific, dedicated to music. And some, I understand, on the cerebello, back here, that move our feet.
Yeah.
They put us to dance.
Yes.
Is that true? Is that what happens?
It's true. The brain evolved over tens of thousands of years with many special processing modules. A part of the brain evolved to do one thing, another part of the brain evolved to do another. They learned to communicate. And yes, there's a part of the brain that when you listen to music, as you say, it's the cerebellum, it makes you want to move to the music, to synchronize your body with the music.
So you don't have to be a musician or like music that much, but you still will.
Most people, I'll tell you a secret though, most musicians are terrible dancers.
Here you have one, and terrible singers also. But I love hearing music, especially classical music. Now,
it's a secret though, what I told you. Just everybody who's watching and
Okay, okay. Now, as you know, and we have spoken about it, we have on one side this Charisma Foundation, where I ask for your support and your advice. How can we integrate music to them, to these 500 people that were attending? I just visited in San Antonio a amusement park, a Disneyland, not so big, but it's totally open to all kinds of people, so no discrimination. You can have there anybody with problems in the brain, problems of mobility, and they have adapted each station for everybody to use it.
Can you have Trump supporters there?
No, they'll be rejected right from the entrance. No, but it's incredible. Many of these stations are related to music. For
Is that
instance,
right?
you have something like a marimba there.
Yeah.
Boom, boom. So these kids or these persons come in, touch, and they really getting the music, and they stay there in that station playing by themselves. And then you have others, of course, like a piano, and all kinds of sounds, like the air moving leaves or something, and everything is therapy for them in that part. So I already sent my Dr. Legorreta. He went to San Antonio, he visited the park. Now he brought in the stations or the small units that we want to include in our project here in San Miguel de Allende. We want it to be the most modern, the most technological, and we're going to do a lot of research of how things work. But tell me more about this connection between music and the brain, because the other thing that we do here is symphonic orchestra and chorus.
Yes.
With poor kids from the region, from rancherias and from small communities, humble families. And it's incredible, absolutely incredible, how stable they become, how harmonious they become. And we can compare that. I don't have to make a research. You go to a community, you see those that are drugging themselves here, which are not behaving well, that are pandilleros or anything else. And you have these other families that are totally well structured, doing good things for the community. So music is of tremendous impact on people's behavior, is it not?
It does. We are a musical species. There is no society or culture that lacks music, and throughout history there's been no time when there wasn't music. We're living in an odd era, an odd time period, because for the last 500 years we've been going against our evolutionary heritage. For tens of thousands of years, humans made music, and we all made it, and we made it together. Starting about 500 years ago, we made a distinction between the professional musicians who we put on a stage and everybody else. And now many of us are told, oh, well, you shouldn't be playing music, you're no good at it. A sentence like that was never spoken in any language of the world until about 500 years ago. Or you shouldn't dance, you're no good at that. Music and dance were a part of the fabric of everyday life for all human beings for at least 50,000 years. And so we're reclaiming that heritage with programs such as yours at San Miguel de Allende with Chrisma, where we're bringing music to people who have been maybe cut off from music. And it excites the brain in a way that nothing else does. The parts of the brain that respond to music are older and more deeply embedded than the parts that respond to language.
So it is more than language.
Yeah, and it has emotional connections. As we all know, it's easier to cry at a piece of music, either tears of sadness or tears of joy, than it is to cry at a speech or a text.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Except when you see these tsunamis in what a terrible thing,
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah.
But anyway, what else can you tell the audience? Because I want audience to be highly interested in culture, in music. There are many, we're just beginning this new economic sector, which is entertainment. It's becoming very strong in Mexico now, maybe because of tourism, and so it's moving fast. And the interest of those who make out of music a professional activity for them, where do they get it? Just by participating since you were kids like you and you just keep on going?
You know, yes, that's one way, but there are lots of ways. There are community bands in many different cities and towns that don't require a particularly high level of expertise. I have friends who are 70 years old and they're amateur musicians, but they show up for rehearsal 3 times a week at a small town in Northern California.
Yes.
And I have a friend who at the age of 70 had never played an instrument and is just starting now. And he takes lessons. He's busy, he's a neuroscientist, so he only plays maybe 10 minutes a day, but he's gotten very good in just a few months.
Yes. Neuroscience.
Yes, sir.
Describe, please.
Neuroscience is the study of the brain and how the brain impacts or affects behavior, either in humans or in animals.
Does this include psychiatrists, psychologists?
Generally, no. Psychiatrists,
Surgeons?
generally not. Psychiatrists and psychologists and surgeons are dealing with patients. Neuroscientists are performing the research that those other professions use in order to know what to do. So I've had many neurosurgeons and medical doctors as my students when I was teaching or in my laboratory, but we're uncovering the fundamental principles that explain how things work. It's sort of the difference between physics and engineering. Physics might discover how the rocket goes up. The engineer actually builds the rocket.
Okay. And that's the same here.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
Vamos un corte y enseguida regresamos con ustedes.
En México, Fundación Azteca ha creado orquestas infantiles en las que cerca de 45,000 niños, sobre todo de escasos recursos, han podido experimentar los beneficios de la práctica musical a lo largo del país. El Centro de Rehabilitación Integral de San Miguel de Allende, mejor conocido como CRISMA, también ha comenzado a implementar la musicoterapia en sus servicios de rehabilitación infantil. Ambas son instancias notables de lo que juntas, la sociedad y el gobierno, pueden alcanzar en beneficio de la población a partir del progreso de la ciencia. La música es uno de los componentes fundamentales de la vida moderna. Nos acompaña en el auto, al hacer ejercicio, al convivir. Su impacto en nuestros estados de ánimo es indudable. Gracias al progreso de la neurociencia, hoy sabemos que también tiene grandes beneficios para nuestras capacidades de aprendizaje. Es por ello que la enseñanza, la práctica y el disfrute de la música constituyen sin lugar a dudas un elemento indispensable para hacer cara a los retos que supone esta era de las definiciones.
Bien, amigas y amigos, estamos de regreso con ustedes en esta muy interesante conversación que para mí es todo aprendizaje, y vamos a estar aquí en Centro Fox. Él va a dar una conferencia magistral sobre estos 4 maravillosos libros que ha escrito, todos ellos bestsellers, y que profundiza muchísimo en lo que es la música, la cultura, pero su conexión con el cerebro y con la estabilidad emocional que todos necesitamos, todas las personas. Okay, Daniel, we're coming back to, I was trying to ask you about how we have a world that brings us surprises every minute of the day, every day, that we see conflict all around, that we see this profound change maybe moving out of what we identified as liberalism, what we identified as the most 3 successful decades for the globe and for the world. We have progress that has been almost incredible, and yet there seems to be a lot of unsatisfaction. There is this new philosophy coming back, telling us that we were wrong, maybe in globalization, that we were wrong on trading and building blocks among nations, that we were wrong on the way to create wealth because it has not been distributed good enough, and so on and on. A lot of criticism, and in a way bringing us to what they call the nation state. That government that controls borders, that controls people, that controls media, that controls, in a way, back to some sort of dictatorship or profoundly authoritarian governments. And we're seeing this all around. And we're seeing isolation as the name of the game, coming back to individual nations and not to blocs like European Union, or in Latin America, same examples. So what would you suggest? What's your vision of the world? Where should we address our efforts? What can we do?
It makes me very sad to see this happening. It's just a terrible development that I could not have foreseen growing up in the 1960s and the 1970s. I thought we were on a path of equal distribution of wealth, a path of democracy and empowerment. I think as a neuroscientist, what I'm seeing is that people are not talking to each other anymore. People from opposite sides of a political view used to sit down and have a rational discussion and find some common ground. This doesn't happen anymore at all in my country. It's happening less in your country than it used to. And all over the world, as you say, people are polarized. And I think that part of that polarization comes from a lack of education and not understanding the other side. It comes from a lack of education in empathy, in understanding that we're all here in the world together and that we have to make it work, that there's some value in what another person thinks. And it comes from an arrogance of thinking that we know everything. Each person thinks, well, I know what the other side thinks, and they're wrong. And the only way progress can come about is through an attitude of humility. Mm-hmm. As you know, I visited with our mutual friend, the Dalai Lama, just 2 weeks ago.
Ah, you did?
Yes.
Where at?
In Dharamshala.
Wow, you went all the way there?
I did.
That's an experience.
We had a wonderful talk about humility, about realizing The way forward for the world is for people to accept that they don't know everything and to try to learn from others. Now, the problem is that if you think you know everything, you can't learn anything, and you don't listen anymore. You asked about a connection to music. It turns out my laboratory had a finding some years ago that we're very excited about. We found that when people listen to music together, their brain waves synchronize. The brain waves become like one brain wave. And so I'm thinking that when world leaders sit down to negotiate, or even within a country, have some music, listen together, that will open up the brain and the heart to negotiation and to common ground.
You know, with this that you're saying, I was thinking that we're being told now that through blockchain and the new technologies, all computers of the world are connected in a way. And so that what you receive from your computer is the same that the guy in Africa received from his computer. Now we share everything inside.
Yes.
But in advance of that, our brain, through our experience with music, does the same thing, synchronizes all of us that are listening to that specific piece of music in that moment.
Yes.
We're all synchronized there.
Yes. And it's more important now than ever.
Blockchain.
It doesn't do any good to have the computers synchronized if the people are not.
Correcto. Excellent. See. Okay. Now, so you said we worried about what could be coming, and is there something that music can do? Because right now we have the mobiles, and I see at least the kids, they use maybe 50% of their mobiles for music. But they are not connected with others, maybe, that they're listening to their music individually, and they don't care about who else is around there, and they are just moving the machine. What's going to be the impact of that on neuroscience and our behavior?
Well, I have three things to say about that very quickly. One is that listening alone goes counter to our evolution and counter to our biology. It contradicts the way we've been as a species. I think listening together is important, whether it's at a concert or having friends over to listen to a recording. The second thing is that listening on a cell phone with little earbuds, you're missing 90% of the music, and you're missing the opportunity for it to...
Why is that you're losing?
Well, you're missing the low frequencies because the earbuds don't reproduce the bass, which carries a lot of the emotional content. You're listening to a compressed version, which has filtered out a lot of the content.
And we don't know about that. We just listen. We're supposed to be listening to the same music.
You don't even know what you're missing.
What music we should hear?
We should hear on a regular stereo system, with headphones or speakers, but
the old ways.
CDs or digital files that are full bandwidth. The third problem here is that musicians are becoming disincentivized to make music because they can't earn a living. Increasingly, the most creative people in our society are not being compensated for their music because of laws. I worked with the Grammy organization for the last 2 years. I met with a number of congressmen and other legislators. We just passed the first of a series of pieces of legislation that we're pushing that will allow a musician to actually earn a living. The average...
I can't believe what you're telling me.
The royalties...
See the multi-billionaires that come from music.
There's a few. There's Bruce Springsteen.
Very few.
They're very, very few. 99% of the money is going to 0.1% of the musicians. It's not an equal distribution of wealth.
I can see that.
And the musicians I know are working jobs as waitresses or as Uber drivers or a number of things. Because in the streaming world, in the world of Spotify and Pandora and free music files, they're not getting compensated.
I know. We're trying to work with an event there at Crisma with Filipa Jordana is coming to San Miguel de Allende for a concert. But in preparing all of that, she's trying to launch a new record. And what we learned from Sony and from all the others is there's no money on putting
Yeah.
out records to the public. No money, you don't make any money.
No.
You make money through presentations, and maybe that's what brings this to such a narrow space for very few to get money out of it, because it has to be on an event. You cannot
Well,
just
and it's
issue-
complicated. You used to be able to, if you could sell 10 million CDs or 10 million records, you could reach a lot of people without having to mess up the carbon footprint and fly and truck in all this equipment. And now you can reach maybe 300 or 1,000 or 10,000 people at a concert, but it's not the same numbers, and it comes at a great expense to the environment.
Okay, well, anyway, I wish the best for musicians.
Me too.
Keep going.
Yes.
Daniel is going to bring solutions to us how we can. What kind of legislation did you push in Congress? Maybe we should do something here in Mexico. It's the same problem, man.
It's a reform. It's the first, as I say, of 2 or 3 different parts that will allow musicians to. The problem is that legislation lagged the development of digital music. And so the royalty rates and the things that applied to radio stations and to records and CDs didn't apply to a streaming service. And we fixed a little part of that.
Okay, because Mexico is exactly the same thing, so we should do something. But for instance, movies.
Same problem.
Cinema. But all of a sudden, Mexico becomes a very fluent movie producers, although there is no return, no money being made.
Yeah.
But they get all the prizes in the world. They get
Yeah.
all the Oscars and
Yeah.
all so they're bright, but yet they're not. Those movies that they're making in Mexico, very successful in this contest, they don't make money.
Right.
Well,
That stifles innovation. Sandra Day O'Connor, the Supreme Court Justice, said that innovation is protected and encouraged by copyright. And we're missing copyright legislation in these creative domains after the digital revolution.
Okay. Well, great. I guess it's time for us to go. Muchísimas gracias, Daniel. I think it's great new things for all of us to listen to. Y a ustedes, amigos, muchísimas gracias. La verdad es sumamente interesante esta conexión. Él va a dar una gran conferencia aquí en Centro Fox, y así tratamos de traer lo mejor del mundo, lo mejor de la economía, de las artes, la cultura a Centro Fox, a nuestras audiencias. Muchas gracias por escucharnos.